The hide sits in the pit for months. Not hours, not a shift. Months. You can smell a tannery before you see it. Bark, wet leather, standing water, something faintly sweet underneath it all. That smell used to mean the same thing in 100 small American towns. Someone was making leather the slow way, and had been for as long as anyone could remember. Not anymore. This is the story of vegetable tanning. The method that used tree bark, water, and patience to turn a raw hide into something that could last a lifetime. It once supported entire towns. Today, it survives in only a handful of workshops across the country, kept alive by a small number of people who learned it before it nearly vanished. What we're going to look at is not a memory of the past. It's a process, a real, physical sequence of steps that modern chrome tanning replaced in a fraction of the time. And by the end, we'll ask a simple question. Is anyone still learning to do this the old way, or is this the last generation that knows how? A hide arrives raw, stiff, still carrying hair, still recognizably an animal. The first job has nothing to do with tanning at all. It's cleaning. The hide is soaked in a lime solution to loosen the hair, then stretched over a curved wooden beam and scraped clean by hand, using a two-handled blade called a fleshing knife. Every hide, scraped individually. No shortcut for this step existed in the 19th century, and none exists in the handful of shops still doing it today. If you've ever watched someone work with their hands this way, repetitive, exact, unhurried, you know it's different from watching a screen. There's a rhythm to it that doesn't translate to video easily. You have to have stood near it. Once the hide is clean, the real transformation begins, and it has almost nothing to do with the animal. It has to do with trees. Vegetable tanning takes its name from tannin, a compound found in bark. In America, the bark varied by region. Hemlock in New England, oak and chestnut through Pennsylvania and Appalachia, until the chestnut blight in the early 1900s quietly took that option away. The bark was stripped from felled trees, dried, and ground into a coarse meal. That bark meal, mixed with water, created the liquor that did the actual work, not through heat, not through chemicals in the modern sense, just slow chemical exchange between bark and hide, over weeks and months, until the fiber structure changed permanently. There was no gauge for tannin strength. No dial. A tanner judged it by color, by smell, sometimes by taste. That judgment took years to build, and it couldn't be written down in any form that actually taught it to someone else. You had to stand beside a person who already knew, for a long time, before your own hands understood what theirs did. Maybe someone in your family worked a trade like this, a trade where the knowledge lived entirely in the body, and nowhere else. Here is where the patience becomes the whole story. The hide moved through a series of pits, each one slightly stronger in tannin than the last. A light hide might need weeks. A heavy sole leather hide could take a year or more, shifted gradually from mild pits to strong ones, never rushed, because rushing it left the leather weak in the center, tanned on the outside, raw underneath. Modern chrome tanning replaced this entire sequence with a single day, chromium salts instead of bark liquor, a process measured in hours instead of seasons. That's not a small difference. That's the entire economic argument against the old method, in one sentence. But something was already changing in these workshops, long before chrome tanning existed, and the people working the pits could feel it before anyone said it out loud. If you've ever shaken hands with someone who spent 40 years working leather, you know their hands don't look like other hands. Permanently darkened from tannin, rough in a specific way that isn't injury. It's just decades of contact with wet hide and bark water. There's one detail that mattered more than people realize. A skilled tanner could tell how a hide would turn out before it ever left the first pit. Not from measuring anything, from how it felt under the hand, the give in the fiber, the way the liquor moved through it. That kind of knowing doesn't come from instruction. It comes from repetition across thousands of hides, over years, until the hand simply knows. That question, whether anyone still learns to feel a hide this way, we'll come back to it. What most people don't know about this trade is that it didn't decline because the leather got worse. Vegetable tanned leather is still considered superior for certain uses. Saddlery, tool belts, boot soles, anything meant to hold shape and improve with age, rather than stay soft and disposable. It declined because of time, and what time costs a business. Chrome tanning cut the process from months to about a day. Bark supply became unreliable after regional deforestation and the loss of the American chestnut. Cheaper imported and synthetic leather reduced demand for anything made slowly. And as the customer base shrank, fewer young workers had a reason to enter a trade that took years to learn and offered a shrinking wage at the end of it. By the mid-20th century, most of the vegetable tanneries that had defined small American towns for generations were gone, converted, or reduced to a fraction of what they once were. A small number of these tanneries are still running today, in Illinois, in Pennsylvania, a few smaller operations elsewhere, mostly supplying saddlers and bootmakers who need the density and aging quality that only bark tanning produces. He was 74 when we found him, started at 16, in a tannery his father worked in before him, 40 years standing beside pits that mostly don't exist anymore, in buildings that have mostly been torn down. He remembers the smell most, not as something unpleasant, as something that simply meant the day had started. Have you seen a workshop like this close in your lifetime? A shop that ran for 100 years and then didn't? Even after tanning, the hide wasn't finished. A courier worked oils and waxes into the leather by hand, compressing and smoothing the fiber until it held the right flexibility for its final use. Sole leather needed density. Harness leather needed to flex without cracking. Each result depended on a different hand process, adjusted entirely by feel. The precision here isn't mechanical, it's sensory, judging moisture by touch, saturation by color, flexibility by bending the leather against a bare hand, over and over, until it responded the way it needed to. Most people today have never held a piece of properly vegetable tanned leather from this period. It has a particular weight to it, a density. It resists, then yields, in a way that modern chrome tanned leather doesn't. And it doesn't just wear down over time. It darkens, develops a surface quality, improves with use in a way a factory product rarely does. That's not a minor technical detail. That's the difference between an object and a product. So, is anyone learning this? A few, not many. Small workshops occasionally take on someone willing to spend years before they're trusted with a hide on their own. There's no accredited path for it, no diploma, just time, next to someone who already knows. Whether that continues for another generation is genuinely uncertain. The tools still exist, the bark can still be sourced, though with more effort than it once took. What's harder to replace is the years of quiet repetition it takes to build the judgment this trade actually depends on. Do you think skills like this should still be taught, even if they're slower and more expensive than the alternative? That's worth sitting with. Skill lives in hands, and hands do not last forever. Under this video, there's a subscribe button. It's a small action, but it helps keep stories like this alive. If craftsmanship still matters to you, if you believe skill deserves to be remembered, subscribing simply means you want these trades documented while they're still here. And before you go, tell us where you're watching from. Is there still a tannery near you? A shoe repair shop? A workshop that smells like oil and leather? Have you lived this life? Or watched it fade? Share your story in the comments. That's how these trades stay visible.